Discover how Bitcoin is changing the landscape of human rights. Let's welcome Alexei from Human Rights Foundation to the stage for his presentation on Bitcoin is Human Rights.
ครับลำดับถัดไปขอเสียงปรบมือให้กับอเล็กซ์ลีด้วยครับ
Hi everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Alex Lee. I work at the Human Rights Foundation. We're a nonprofit that promotes human rights in authoritarian countries. Now a lot of people may ask, what does Bitcoin have to do with human rights? After all, isn't Bitcoin just digital gold or an investment or a way to get rich quick? But a lot of people don't actually realize Bitcoin is one of the most powerful human rights tools that we have today. So that's me. At the Human Rights Foundation, I work at the Bitcoin Development Fund. The Bitcoin Development Fund is a program at the Human Rights Foundation where we try to make Bitcoin an easier and safer tool to use for human rights activists and nonprofits. We help activists use Bitcoin through workshops, and we also host the Oslo Freedom Forum. The Oslo Freedom Forum is a conference that the Human Rights Foundation has every year. Think of it like the World Economic Forum, but instead of having just politicians and rich people, it's all human rights activists and human rights defenders trying to make the world a better and more free place. What is one of the biggest problems that we have today? One of the biggest problems that we have today is that money is a form of enslavement and control. And dictators weaponize the financial system against their opposition. Today, 5.7 billion people live under an authoritarian regime. And what does that mean? What is an authoritarian regime? An authoritarian regime is one where you cannot freely criticize the leaders that rule over you. You don't have free speech, you don't have basic human rights like freedom of religion, freedom of the press. You can't go to a rally. You can't criticize politicians. You can't make fun of the people in charge. And this is just a map right now of what the Human Rights Foundation considers to be democratic, hybrid authoritarian, and fully authoritarian regimes. Different people will have different opinions on this map, but I believe this to be generally accurate, right? And why is authoritarianism a problem today, right? Why should we care? After all, a lot of people live in authoritarian regimes and lead very successful, prosperous, and vibrant lives. A lot of people live in democratic regimes, like I'm from the United States. And if you just read the news about the United States, you'll definitely hear about, all the problems that we have and how people, even in free democratic societies, are facing a lot of problems, whether that's to do with poverty, equality, healthcare, etc., education. The reality is, authoritarianism is the root cause of many of the world's problems today. Authoritarianism is responsible for roughly 97% of the world's refugees. Authoritarian regimes are responsible for 79% of the world's active conflicts today. 18 out of 20 countries with the world's worst access to drinking water are authoritarian regimes. 90% of the lowest ranked countries in combating human trafficking are authoritarian regimes. And 9 of the world's top 10 poorest countries are authoritarian regimes. It turns out when you can't criticize the people in charge, when you don't have free speech and you can't freely criticize the policies of the government in charge, when you can't freely assemble, etc., it generally leads to worse outcomes on average for the people living in those countries. And what is one of the solutions to that? Bitcoin doesn't fix everything, obviously. Bitcoin can't just owning Bitcoin won't suddenly make the world more free. Just you owning Bitcoin won't fix all of the world's problems. But Bitcoin is a powerful tool for human rights activists and everyday people living under authoritarianism because Bitcoin is freedom money that dictators can't stop. What does that mean? What are some of the properties of Bitcoin that make it so attractive and useful for regular people and people living under authoritarian regimes? Well, first of all, Bitcoin is censorship resistant. And what that means is when you are using Bitcoin, when you hold Bitcoin, nobody can stop you from sending Bitcoin to someone else, and nobody can stop someone from receiving Bitcoin. The government or ruler or your local politician can't just call the Bitcoin bank and be like, hey, stop so-so from using Bitcoin. I don't like him, he's a bad person. Anyone can use Bitcoin, and the government can't stop you from sending or receiving it. Bitcoin is seizure resistant. And what that means is the government can't just easily make a phone call and steal your Bitcoin or steal your money in the same way they can do if you have money in a bank account. Now, one of the most important things is in Bitcoin is not your keys, not your coins. So if you're holding Bitcoin on a custodial exchange, a custodial platform, you don't really own your Bitcoin. But if you do self-custody, if you do hold the keys to your coins, Bitcoin is seizure resistant. The government can't just easily steal it or take it away from you. Bitcoin is borderless. It doesn't matter if you're in Thailand, if you're in Burma, if you're in the United States, if you're in Singapore, if you're in Saudi Arabia, if you're in Kenya, if you're in South Africa or Afghanistan or anywhere in the world. You can send Bitcoin to anyone in the world, and anyone in the world can receive Bitcoin from you. All they need is internet connection, a smartphone, and if you live in a country that has a service like Manchikura, even just a feature phone will work, right? Bitcoin is pseudonymous. Bitcoin is permissionless and pseudonymous. Permissionless means you don't need someone's permission to use Bitcoin. You don't need to take your ID card and beg someone at the government office to let you open a Bitcoin account. Just the other day, I arrived in Bangkok and I wanted to buy a subway card to go ride the BTS train here, right? And I went to the counter and the person was like, passport please. And I was like, what? I need my passport just to get the rechargeable, reloadable subway card, right? Bitcoin is completely different. You can just download an app on your phone and you can receive Bitcoin in 5 seconds. You don't need someone's permission. You don't need a passport, an ID card, social security number, birth certificate, blah, blah, blah. You just need to have an internet connection and a smartphone. Bitcoin is pseudonymous. And what that means is it's not fully private, it's not anonymous, but pseudonymous. You can choose and selectively choose to reveal your identity when you use Bitcoin. All transactions on the Bitcoin main chain are public and transparent. You can see all the transactions that are happening on the Bitcoin network. That makes it verifiable, secure. But there are obviously ways to make Bitcoin more private and scalable, which is why Bitcoin is programmable. It's software. You can build layers and build upgrades on top of Bitcoin to make it faster, cheaper to use, more private. And Bitcoin is peer-to-peer, right? And that is part of why Bitcoin is decentralized. It's a peer-to-peer network. When you broadcast a Bitcoin transaction, you're connecting to a global network of nodes, right? You're not connecting to the Bank of Thailand server somewhere. You're not connecting to some, fintech app. You're connecting to a peer-to-peer global network of computers, right? So today I wanted to go over 3 case studies of how Bitcoin is being used by human rights activists around the world to resist authoritarianism, resist oppression, and highlight why Bitcoin is freedom money and why Bitcoin is human rights. After all, if you read the news, you often hear bad things about Bitcoin, right? Like Bitcoin's being used by bad people. Bitcoin's being used by terrorists or money launderers or so-and-so. And oftentimes, that's totally true. But the reality is any useful tool that you have today will be used by people you don't like, right? It doesn't matter if you have a cell phone, a car, or a knife, right? If a tool is useful, it's inevitably going to be used by bad people, right? Bad people use useful things. But you can't just look at the ways that bad people are using tools. You also have to be honest with yourself and see how good people are using these tools to make the world a better place, which is why I'm going over 3 case studies of how Bitcoin is being used to promote human rights. Number 1. So case study number 1 is Alexei Navalny in Russia. This is a photo of Alexei Navalny at an anti-Putin rally in Russia. And if you don't know who Alexei Navalny is, he was the leading dissident resisting Vladimir Putin and resisting authoritarianism in Russia before he was killed by the Russian government. And what a lot of people don't know about the late and great Alexei Navalny is he used Bitcoin as a fundamental part of his work. His nonprofit, the Anti-Corruption Foundation, exposed corruption inside Vladimir Putin's regime. He exposed how the government was stealing billions of dollars from people. He was exposing how the government was assassinating political dissidents, imprisoning political dissidents. Basically, he was exposing how the Russian regime and Vladimir Putin were destroying Russia from within. And that made him a target. And what people often don't recognize is that when dictators find someone they don't like, one of the first things they do is they cut off their access to the banking system and they try to steal their money, right? So here, this is a news article. Alexei Navalny, President Putin's most prominent domestic critic, said yesterday that the authorities had frozen his personal bank accounts and those of his wife, children, and elderly parents as revenge for his investigations into Kremlin corruption. So not only did the Russian regime freeze his personal bank accounts That wasn't good enough for them. They had to freeze the bank accounts of his wife, children, and parents. That just goes to show you how the government will weaponize the financial system against opposition. Now, people often know that, of course, if you're a critic of the government, you'll often get beaten by the police and you'll get thrown into prison. But you also have your personal finances controlled and stolen. This is a screenshot from the Anti-Corruption Foundation's personal nonprofit bank accounts. And you can see that they have a balance of negative 999,544,509.33. Right? So not only did they freeze the bank accounts of Alexei Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation, they gave him a negative balance. Right? That's just ridiculous. And you can see that everything's red, negative, 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 delete, delete, delete. Let's steal all your money and try to use money as a way to control you. Because if you think about it, if you don't have money, how can you live, right? If you don't have a bank account, you can't pay for your website host, you can't pay your staff and volunteers, you can't even buy like papers and pens and computers on Amazon. How can you really operate as a nonprofit, right? How can you operate as a person? And that's why dictators weaponize the financial system, because it's one of the easiest ways to control someone. Now, and then, the story, unfortunately, is not a happy story. He was poisoned in Germany. He was poisoned, sentenced to prison, and unfortunately ended up dying in prison. Alexei Navalny passed away recently this year in prison. So it's not totally a happy story. But on the bright side, this is more sad news, right? And not only do dictators weaponize the financial system, they use the financial system to try to control people, right? So not only did they freeze the bank accounts of Alexei Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation, they would also arrest and detain people for simply donating money to it, to the Anti-Corruption Foundation using credit cards or the banking system, right? So here we have a case of a Russian journalist who was detained for donating $16 to Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation. And you have reporters being arrested as well. But one great news today is the Anti-Corruption Foundation is still running. And the way they're doing that is by using Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, right? Because of the properties of Bitcoin, like I mentioned earlier, it's borderless, it's permissionless, seizure-resistant, censorship-resistant. People are able to donate to the Anti-Corruption Foundation to keep the bills running, to keep the bills going, keep the lights on. This is a post from the Anti-Corruption Foundation. Help us uncover the truth behind Navalny's murder. You can donate. Cryptocurrency, in particular, is particularly essential for this investigation. To enhance security, we've implemented a feature to generate a one-time Bitcoin address, making it harder to trace such transactions, right? The Vladimir Putin regime cannot stop Bitcoin. They can freeze your bank account, they can steal your money, but they can't stop you from sending Bitcoin in donations. And they can't stop Alexei Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation from using Bitcoin to continue to keep the lights on and keep paying staff. And this is a photo of some of the public staff at the Anti-Corruption Foundation. And every one of the people you see here is able to keep their important investigative work. They're able to keep working because of Bitcoin and Bitcoin donations. Another case study I wanted to highlight is from Nigeria and the hashtag #EndSARS campaign. If you don't know about SARS, SARS is the Special Anti-Robbery Squad in Nigeria. They're a police unit that is implicated in notorious human rights abuses. They've been linked to, rape, murder, kidnapping people and then extorting their family members for money. They're just responsible for a huge amount of human rights abuses. And of course, the people fought back. They started protesting and they started donating to nonprofits and investigative journalists to try to put pressure on the government to stop the SARS Special Anti-Robbery Squad. And this is a news release. The government did the most predictable thing as ever. They froze the bank accounts linked to #EndSARS promoters. So people who are promoting protest movements to peacefully push back against government corruption and abuse had their bank accounts frozen. Who could have thought? And this is a quote from the former Central Bank of Nigeria Governor Godwin Emefiele. The destination, as far as I am concerned, is to achieve a 100% cashless economy in Nigeria, right? Because protesters could still use cash to donate and support causes that they wanted to support. And the government right now still can't completely control cash. And that's one of the reasons why the government of Nigeria wants to ban cash and get rid of cash. So they have total electronic and financial surveillance over the entire country. Unfortunately for the Nigerian government, they cannot ban Bitcoin. They can try to ban Bitcoin, they can try to make it harder for people to use Bitcoin, but they can't stop people from sending Bitcoin donations, receiving Bitcoin donations, and spending Bitcoin donations. And Bitcoin helped power the largest Nigerian protests in a generation. Here's Jack Dorsey tweeting, donate via Bitcoin to help hashtag end SARS, right? Because some of the feminist coalition in Nigeria set up a BTC Pay server. It's a Bitcoin donation processing platform that allows people to more anonymously and privately receive Bitcoin donations that the government can't stop or easily track and surveil. And using Bitcoin, the feminist coalition was able to fundraise hundreds of thousands of dollars towards legal support, medical support, relief for victims of police brutality, memorializing people who were killed by the police, and mental health support. And this story has a somewhat more happy ending. The special anti-robbery squad was disbanded, so the protesters were able to achieve some of their demands. Now police corruption and abuse continues in Nigeria today, but it's a more happy story. And the third case study I wanted to highlight is from a country called Burma. If you don't know about Burma, Burma is a country that borders Thailand. And right now there is a civil war with resistance groups and freedom fighters trying to topple the military-backed junta government in Burma. Now, again, here's another story. Myanmar shutters 700 mobile bank accounts suspected of funding anti-junta forces. While some may have funded the resistance, many belong to civilian business owners. So another story as old as time, you could repeat this across almost any authoritarian regime today. People try to fundraise to resist against dictatorship, and the government steals their money and shuts off bank accounts. And just like the case with Russia, Myanmar junta metes out long prison sentences for a small donation. The military is using a rewritten anti-terrorism law to sentence donors to 10 years, sources say. So people who have donated money to support protests and resistance are getting 10-year prison sentences. This is a short screenshot from one of those news articles. This 19-year-old individual was sentenced to 10 years in prison for sending $8 to a revolutionary group via a KBZ Bank mobile wallet servers. Two other young women who are students at Dawei University were sentenced to 7 years in prison for donating 5,000 kyats, which is roughly $2 to $3, to the local People's Defense Force militia, right? Again, if you use the existing financial infrastructure, it is surveilled and controlled. If you donate money to groups the government doesn't like, you can be arrested and thrown in prison. Another example of the government weaponizing the financial system for its own purposes. But there's a bit of hope. Bitcoin is becoming a lifeline for political dissidents in Myanmar. Following a military coup in 2021, resistance groups in Myanmar are in need of alternative financial solutions like Bitcoin. Because unlike the traditional financial system, which is tracked, surveilled, and totally controlled by the Burmese military, Bitcoin is not tracked, surveilled, and fully controlled by the Burmese military. Like the previous examples, the Burmese government cannot stop Bitcoin. The Burmese government cannot stop protesters from donating using Bitcoin. The Burmese government can't stop resistance groups from using Bitcoin to finance their operations because of the properties of Bitcoin. With Bitcoin, Xi Jinping can't micro-track you, Putin can't freeze you, the Burmese junta can't delete you, and Chavismo can't hyperinflate you, right? This is what sets Bitcoin apart from the traditional financial system. Now, a lot of times I get this question because I work at the Human Rights Foundation and we are a Bitcoin-only organization. Why don't you use XYZ coin? You know, there's so many coins out there. There's like probably 100,000 different cryptocurrencies out there right now, you know, and you've definitely heard of them. Why not use them? Why are you guys so focused on Bitcoin? Isn't Bitcoin like this slow and expensive and boring thing that like, you know, it's not sexy and exciting, right? Like you need to use XYZ new coin that's being invented that's 10,000 times faster and it's cheaper and blah, blah, blah. Well, the answer is very simple. Security and decentralization. Bitcoin is the most secure and decentralized network out there. And if you're a human rights activist who's operating in very repressive and difficult political environments, you can't afford to use a different coin where that is not as secure and is a different coin that is not as decentralized, right? Like all these other coins, they have some foundation, they have some founder, there's some famous person behind the coin or who founded the coin, who probably owns a lot of the coin because he started the coin and kept a lot of the coin for himself. And they have a lot of political influence and control over the direction of that cryptocurrency, right? Whether you're talking about Ethereum or Solana or any other coin, they usually have a foundation, they have a founder, that person has political control over the coin. They can decide to change the rules and make the coin more inflationary. Or they'll market it and say the coin is deflationary now, and then change it back to inflationary the next year, right? But Bitcoin is different. Bitcoin is about rules without rulers. We have simple rules in Bitcoin. 21 million cap, 21 million supply cap that's unchangeable. We have a block that averages a new Bitcoin block on average every 10 minutes. Simple rules, right? No fancy 25,000 different upgrades that are gonna make everything better and better and better because we don't compromise on security. Because we don't compromise on security and decentralization in the Bitcoin network. Well, a lot of people also talk about stablecoins, and stablecoins are great, right? Stablecoins are a very useful tool for people now. But at the end of the day, they're just an extension of the traditional financial system, right? If you don't know what a stablecoin is, they're a cryptocurrency token that aims to track the price of the US dollar, right? They try to maintain a peg to the US dollar where one DT in the case of Tether, or one USDC in the case of Circle, is supposed to remain pegged to one US dollar, right? They're a great tool. Millions of people around the world, whether in Venezuela, Argentina, whether in the Middle East and Lebanon, if you're in Afghanistan, use stable coins to avoid hyperinflation and inflation. They're a great and powerful tool. But at the end of the day, they're centralized, right? Because the whole idea of a stable coin is they have US dollars sitting in a bank somewhere, right? They have US dollars sitting in a bank somewhere, and that can be monitored, surveilled, and frozen. So here's an example, right? Tether freezes 32 crypto addresses linked to terrorism warfare in Israel and Ukraine. Now, if you're Tether, that's probably a good idea, right? You don't want terrorists and criminal organizations using your coin. But what happens if you're a human rights activist who's resisting the government, and the government gives Tether a phone call that says, so-and-so person is a terrorist. You know, they criticized me on Twitter. They hurt my feelings, and I wanted to throw them in prison, freeze their bank account, freeze their Tether. Well, what's Tether gonna do? Well, they don't really have a choice. They're a company. They have a headquarters somewhere. They have people working at the company who can be thrown in prison. They have no choice to comply. It's just the reality. And I wanted to close with a very important project by the Human Rights Foundation. The Human Rights Foundation, we have a project called the CBDC Tracker, Central Bank Digital Currency Tracker. And if you don't know what a CBDC is, it's a central bank digital currency. And what that means is, imagine you had dollars, right? You have money today, you have money in your favorite phone app, you have your digital QR code payment service. But instead of a bank, instead of a private company like the Bank of Thailand or a popular fintech app controlling that money, it would be the central bank itself, the Central Bank of Thailand controlling your money. Now, why might you be concerned about that? After all, we all use these payment apps, we use cash, we use credit cards. What's so scary about the government having total control over the money that you use day to day? Well, the Human Rights Foundation CBDC Tracker aims to track the growth of CBDCs and explain the growing human rights threats that they pose. So I wanted to highlight a country, Thailand, because I'm in Taiwan right now. So if you use the CBDC tracker, we tell you the status of the CBDC in the country in question, tell you the launch date of the CBDC, give you statistics about the monetary base, inflation, freedom rankings of the country in question. I wanted to highlight Thailand because Thailand recently launched the CBDC only a couple months ago, August 1st, 2024, and you may not even know about it. And why would you care about the CBDC, right? So this is just some quick information about the CBDC. They're distributing 10,000 baht to Thai citizens over the age of 16 with incomes under 840,000 baht and savings under 500,000 baht. Furthermore, recipients are not allowed to spend the money on lottery tickets, alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, kratom, gift cards, cash cards, gold, diamonds, gems, oil, fuel, natural gas, electrical appliances, so on and so on. At the end of the day, CBDCs give the government total control and they enslave you. With the CBDC, the government can simply delete your money just for simply criticizing them. They can prevent you from using your own money on things that they don't like. Now, obviously, regardless of your personal opinions, you may not like people spending money on alcohol or tobacco, but that's just the beginning. Give it a month, give it a year, soon it'll be illegal to spend your money. It'll be illegal to donate money to political opposition, to political candidates, people they don't like, etc. And we really have to fight back now, right, before it's too late. We really have to fight the growth of CBDCs before it's too late, before you wake up one day and your son will be a slave. We have to fight back now. You can learn more about the CBDC tracker by scanning this QR code, visiting the website. You can, check out the website on your phone or your computer and learn about the growth of CBDCs and the growing human rights risk that they pose. hrf.org/CBDC tracker, of course. And if you have any questions, feel free to follow me on Noster or just catch me while I'm walking around. Thanks so much for your time. I love Thailand. Thank you.